Hello everyone. Before I start, I'd just like to thank the Government of Gujarat and in particular the executive here at PDPU, particularly Professor Banik and Dr. Dave, who have supported our visit here to this event. Thank you very much. What I'll do today is, there's been a lot of speakers that have talked and looked at the micro level. At the macro level, apologies. What I intend to do is to perhaps look at this question very much from a micro level and from my own university's perspective of how we've gone about identifying and internationalising our research collaboration. And I'll give a number of pointers towards that. I think, excuse me while yep. And so what I'll do is start with a very short brief about the university and then talks about some of our collaborations and some of our research institutes that look into internationalisation of our research. The university, I won't go into too much details, but we're a mid-sized Australian university located south of Sydney. We have a long history of internationalisation at the university. This year we celebrate 20 years of having a campus in Dubai. Very importantly, as a university, our vision is, obviously it's written up there, but very much looking at ensuring that we make an impact not just to our students but to the broader community in which we teach and are located in, and that includes our offshore operations as well. Very much, the University of Wollongong was developed to service the requirements of industry. The region that we work in is a mining and steel production city, and we were very much developed to service the requirements of those sectors approximately 50 years ago today. So from the start, we've been very much focused on applied research, but have not forgotten about basic research as well. One example around our research is, like most universities, we can't do everything really well. So what we've tried to do is to be smart and focused. In fact, one of our centres is actually it was won via a competitive grant during the global financial crisis where national governments were looking at infrastructure development. Every university in Australia tendered for this project. The University of Wollongong was successful in its tender and received approximately 60 million Australian dollars, both from federal and state governments. Now, the centre itself is a combination of a number of our own centres that we have clustered together, interdisciplinary centres working across faculties to look at simulation, modelling, analysis, research and teaching, thus the acronym SMART. And it's probably unique in the world that we have over 200 researchers clustered around this centre. And this didn't appear overnight, but it is a combination of a number of interdisciplinary research centres that we were able to strategically position within our larger grouping that has worked very well for us and the alliances that has brought about. And these are some of the gentlemen that we have recruited. There is a number of women there too, but I've just realised there's a lot of men in that photo. So these are some of the people that we recruited internationally. But the purpose of the Institute itself is to publish and disseminate ideas that support greater interdisciplinarity and looking at the education and looking at infrastructure systems itself, and some very large projects that I can talk to you about later on. Overall, the University of Wollongong has been engaging in a number of internationalised activities. Research collaborations are spreading the breadth from basic to applied. Research collaboration incorporating both industry and government. Commercialisation activities, which I can talk about, I won't have time now, but it's a costly exercise, not always successful, but I can talk about that. Joint supervision and joint PhD supervision over between institutions, obviously collaborative research projects. We've been very successful in gaining both government grants from the Australian government and the country that we participate in, because we target those grants and we're quite focused in our tenders for those grants by clustering experts from each of those institutions. So we have a long track record of achieving quite significant grants from Chinese government, Indian government and Australian governments, for example, in those areas and those other areas. I think what you see on this slide is some quite traditional aspects of what most universities undertake. One thing that we have done in the past quite well is also training of public and private sector staff from various countries for both award and non-award degrees as well. The other area that we will look into, but I'm running out of time, is transnational education, but I won't go into that. But wherever possible, I think this slide is very important. We work to develop a consortium approach to international collaborations, striving to develop linkages and align itself in key discipline sectors across the board, academia, industry, and government, in select countries whereby greatest impact can be derived for our key priorities, and moving into countries that have aligned priorities within our university's research strengths. With India itself, we have a number of strategic priorities. We've established a new relationship with the Council of Scientific and Industrial Research, and we have developed a Centre of Excellence, which is on our, what we call our Innovation Campus. I'll just quickly flick through these. We have a strong collaboration with industry. From the inception, University of Wollongong has commercialised a lot of its research. We were the first university in the world to commercialise the Unix operating system back in the mid-1970s. We have a company that still is called the University of Wollongong, running out of Silicon Valley. So a lot of impact for a small university. We also have a number of Indian companies working with us, collaborating to undertaking research with us, but also recruiting our graduates, and Emphasis is a recent example of that. One thing that we do quite well, and I notice a lot of universities are moving in this space, is what I would call tripartite relationships. Academic institutions from different countries working with industry partners from a specific country. I won't have time to go into this, but our relationship with Bao Steel in China is quite an interesting relationship that's worth scrutinising. If you get time, these slides will be available to you. And I'll just quickly flick through this, but basically the university was working with two high-end academic institutions in China. We have been collaborating with them for a number of years through international conferences and research. They introduced us to a very strong industry partner. The industry partner now, over many years, has undertaken a number of projects with us. And the upshot is that we've developed a Centre of Excellence now, which runs across a consortium of high-end Australian universities, including ourselves, the University of New South Wales and University of Queensland. Last year, we received $1.2 million from Bao Steel for research, very applied research. There's some motivations why the industry partner was working with us. I won't go into it. Sorry, I'm just playing around with that, thank you. There's another case study that I won't have time to mention, is in terms of our Power Quality and Reliability Centre. A very strong mix of both industry experts and high-end researchers working together. This is the last slide. So lessons learned from the UAW experience. They're quite comprehensive, but I've tried to summarise a couple of these. Defined research academic engagement that aligns with the institution's key priorities. And how we've done that is to ensure that there's a central strategic plan that embeds internationalisation, and most importantly has buy-in from our academics and administrative staff. And that's something we're working at. We never get that right, but that's critically important. Obviously, the other point is who we work with matters. Each party should bring their unique value add to the collaborative activity. And again, you can't work with everyone, I think it's an important point. We've led with our best researchers and clustered around other like-minded institutions. I think that's a very important point. I think the most important point that we all know, but it's very hard to implement, is to keep focused with clearly defined goals of each project prior to commencement. Have a longer-term approach rather than trying to do too many projects too quickly. Start with one project with each institution. Don't make the mistake of trying to resource too many of those projects. And again, too many partners in one country, we won't be able to resource that. Every university has resource implications to any of their projects, so how we do that is incredibly important. I think most important, again, is workloads of our academic staff. Enthusing them to work on a project is usually a zero-sum game. They usually have to give up something else. So it's got to be something which is advantageous both for their promotion, but also for the university as well. Working towards institutionalising the relationship is also very critical. You find when your key researchers leave one of those relationships, the relationship withers very quickly. I think it's important to institutionalise that relationship, and I won't go into that now, but that's something which what we've tried to do is, a lot of these relationships we've tried to do is foster, and how we foster that is obviously multiple engagement with multiple academic parties over a longer period of time. I think the last point is the most important as well. It's the consortium approach. We can't do it on our own. We can't create impact by doing this on our own. And incredibly important, I think, is it gives those type of collaborations gives us a greater chance to develop not only a higher profile for our institution, but the potential to give those staff and critically important students a more dynamic and rewarding internationalisation experience. So thank you very much. I'm happy to talk about this later on.